Welcome to Thalira Tales, where stories bloom in silence, carrying emotion, mystery, and hidden truth. Step in and let the tale unfold.
It was a birthday night, snow falling soft outside, candles lit, a child laughing in the kitchen. Then my phone rang, and my father's voice came through like a blade through ice. Get the child and walk out of that house, right now. Do not wait. Just go. I did not ask why. I did not hesitate. I grabbed my son, and I drove north into the dark, and 30 seconds later, the house behind us disappeared into fire. That was the night I stopped being a wife. That was the night I started becoming the one thing he never prepared for. I'm so grateful to have you here. This story is about to get intense. I'd love to know who I'm talking to. What city or country are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. Pay close attention to every detail, because the final twist will challenge everything you believe about trust. Stay tuned until the very end to see how justice truly finds its way in the shadows. Also, please note this story includes fictional elements for entertainment. Any resemblance to specific names or settings is coincidental, but the message I'm conveying is useful. The snow had been falling over Denver since noon, soft and steady, the kind that makes the whole world look gentler than it is. I was standing at the kitchen counter with flour on my hands and a smile I had not planned for, when Mason burst through the kitchen doorway, sock feet sliding on the tile, both arms stretched wide. "Mom, is it ready? Is the cake ready yet?" "Almost." I laughed, that warm, real kind of laugh that comes up from somewhere deep and catches you off guard. "5 more minutes." "You said 5 more minutes 20 minutes ago." He pressed his nose against the oven glass, his breath fogging it immediately. Little hands gripping the handle he was not supposed to touch. "Mason Richard Bell, step away from that oven." He spun around, grinning the way only 8-year-olds can, reckless and bright and completely unafraid of anything. "I just want to see it." "You'll see it when it's done, birthday boy." I crossed the kitchen and pulled him into a hug from behind, pressing my cheek against the top of his head. He smelled like the outdoors and something sweet, and I held on a half-second longer than necessary because something in me, some quiet animal instinct I could not name, wanted to hold on. "Dad's coming, right?" he asked, pulling back to look up at me. "He texted me an hour ago, buried in paperwork, but he'll be here." I tucked his collar straight with 2 fingers. He wouldn't miss this. Mason's face broke into the widest smile I had ever loved. Okay, good." By 7:20, the cake sat on the table. 8 candles, 8 small flames standing perfectly still in the windless kitchen air. I dialed my father on the tablet and propped it against the fruit bowl. His face appeared silver-haired and warm, calling in from Arizona. The moment he saw Mason, his whole expression cracked open with joy. "There's my boy, 8 years old. Come here, let me see you." Mason scrambled into the chair and leaned so close to the screen his nose almost touched it. "Grandpa, Mom made the chocolate one, the one with the white frosting." "That's your grandmother's recipe," my father said, his voice thick with something tender. "She would have been so proud of you, son." My eyes stung. I blinked hard and turned toward the counter, pressing my thumb against the corner of my eye before the tears could form properly. Not tonight. Tonight was for Mason. "Allie?" My father's voice reached me across the kitchen. "You doing all right?" "Perfect," I called back, waving one hand without turning around. "Absolutely perfect." I was reaching for the lighter when my phone vibrated against the counter. The screen read Dad. I frowned. He was already on the tablet. Why was he calling my phone? I answered. "Allie." His voice hit me like cold water. It was not the same voice from the tablet. This voice was stripped, raw, wound tight, barely holding its shape. "Allie, listen to me. You need to get Mason and walk out of that house right now." My chest locked. "Dad, what?" "No questions." His breath came in hard, clipped bursts. "There is no time. Do not turn off the lights. Do not touch your purse. Do not wait for Ethan. Walk to the car, put Mason inside, and drive north. Do you hear me, north?" My hands began to shake. Not tremble, shake. The lighter rattled against the counter when I set it down. "You're scaring me," I whispered. "Good." His voice cracked on the word, and that terrified me more than anything else. My father did not crack. "Being scared means you'll move fast. Please, Allie. Please, just go." Something broke open inside my chest. I did not understand. I did not need to. Mason. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Baby, we need to go for a drive. Right now. He looked at the candles still burning, all 8 of them. His lower lip pushed forward. But Mom, we didn't even sing yet. I know, sweetheart. My throat tightened so hard it hurt. I know. I'm so sorry. I promise we'll celebrate. But right now we need to go. I carried him to the car. I did not look back at the house. I pressed the gas and drove north. My father still breathing in my ear, Mason asking questions from the back seat I could not answer, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my jaw. Then the night cracked open behind us. The blast wave rolled through the car like a giant's fist. I screamed. Mason screamed. I hit the brakes so hard the car fishtailed across the shoulder, and when I looked into the rearview mirror, I stopped breathing completely. Our house was gone. Just fire now. Enormous roaring climbing into the December sky. And somewhere inside that fire were 8 birthday candles that never got blown out. I sat on the shoulder of the road for exactly 4 seconds. Then I pressed the gas and drove. Mason was crying in the back seat, not the loud crying of a child who wants something, but the quiet, frightened kind that comes from somewhere too deep for words. His hands gripped the edge of his booster seat and his whole body shook with it. Mom, his voice cracked. Mom, our house. I know, baby. My own voice surprised me how flat it was, how controlled, like something separate from the rest of me had taken over the wheel. I know. Keep your seatbelt on. Where are we going? Away from here. I checked the rearview mirror. Fire still painted the sky behind us, but what I was looking for was not fire. I was looking for headlights. I found them. A black SUV 3 car lengths back, moving at exactly my speed. Not gaining, not falling behind, just keeping pace, patient and deliberate the way a predator moves when it already knows where its prey is going. My stomach turned to ice. I accelerated. The black SUV accelerated. I moved into the left lane. The black SUV moved into the left lane. I pressed my fist against my mouth to stop the sound that wanted to come out of my throat. There were no police sirens behind us. No fire trucks heading toward our street. No emergency lights cutting through the snow in either direction. The world was going about its business as if a house had not just been erased from the face of the earth, as if we had not just barely been inside it. That was when I noticed the blue light on the dashboard, the GPS indicator, glowing steady and calm. I had not turned navigation on. I had not touched the screen. Someone else had. No. The word came out of me like a breath punched from my lungs. I reached over and jammed my thumb against the power button on the screen. The display went dark. Then it came back on by itself, the blue dot already recalculating. My phone rang. The screen read Ethan. I stared at his name for 2 full rings. Then I answered it because not answering felt more dangerous than hearing his voice. Allie. He sounded breathless, urgent, the exact way a worried husband should sound. Oh, thank God. I just heard about the explosion. Are you okay? Where are you? Is Mason with you? Something cold and precise moved through my chest. Not grief, not panic. Something that felt almost like clarity. We got out, I said carefully. We're on the highway. Okay. Okay, good. I could hear him exhaling, performing relief with the skill of someone who had practiced it. Listen, there's a gas station off Route 9 about 4 miles north of your position. I'm sending a response team there right now. Can you get there? My position, he knew my exact position. I'll try, I said. Drive straight there. Don't stop anywhere else. I'm coming, Allie. I love you. He hung up before I could answer. My hands tightened on the wheel until my knuckles ached. I looked in the rearview mirror at Mason, who had stopped crying and was wiping his face with the back of his sleeve, his little chest still hitching with the aftershocks of it. His tablet was open on the seat beside him, the screen glowing soft blue in the dark car. The front-facing camera was on. The tiny red recording light was on. My heart lurched so violently I nearly swerved. I grabbed the tablet with one hand and shoved it face down under the passenger seat in a single motion, my breath coming fast and ragged, now the control I had been holding onto fracturing at its edges. Mom, Mason's voice was small. Why did you grab my tablet? The battery, I managed. I don't want it to die. He accepted this the way children accept things that do not fully make sense, with a small nod, and the kind of trust that breaks your heart on a good day and destroys it on a night like this one. Ethan was not at Route 9. Ethan had never planned to be at Route 9. He had been watching us through the camera on our son's tablet. He had tracked us in real time, had heard Mason crying, had heard my voice telling Mason we were going away from here, and he had used it all to calculate exactly where to send his people. He had never lost us at all. And the worst part, the part that made my eyes burn and my throat close and my foot press harder into the gas than it ever had before, was that I had handed him that tablet myself. I had buckled it in right next to my son. I pulled off at the first rest stop. I found a dark strip of cracked asphalt and two flickering lights at the edge of nowhere, and I sat there with the engine running and my forehead pressed against the steering wheel. Then I grabbed the tablet from under the passenger seat and threw it out the window into the snow. I watched it disappear into the white and felt nothing, no hesitation, no grief for the thing. I was past grief for things. Mason stirred in the back seat. "Mom, are we stopping?" "Just for a minute." I turned around and looked at him, his face pale and puffy from crying. His birthday shirt wrinkled, his hair going in every direction. My chest ached so badly I had to breathe through it. "Are you okay back there, baby?" "I'm cold." He pulled his knees to his chest. "And I'm hungry. We didn't eat the cake." "I know." I reached back and squeezed his foot through his sock. "I know we didn't. I'm so sorry about tonight. I'm going to fix this, okay? I promise you, I'm going to fix this." "Is Daddy coming to find us?" The question hit me somewhere below the ribs. I turned back around before he could see my face change. "I don't know yet," I said, which was the most honest thing I could offer him. I got out of the car and crouched down beside the front wheel while running my fingers along the underside of the frame in the dark. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost missed it. A small magnetic box the size of a matchbook clipped to the metal just behind the left front tire. I pried it off and held it up. A GPS tracker, commercial grade, the kind you could order online for $40. Simple, efficient, invisible, unless you knew to look. Ethan had known I would run. He had planned for it. I hurled the tracker as far as I could into the dark field beside the rest stop and got back in the car. Hands trembling, jaw tight, every nerve in my body pulled wire thin. That was when I remembered the medication. 3 weeks ago, my father had borrowed the car to drive to a pharmacy outside the city. He had been having chest pains, the kind he always dismissed, and I always worried about. When he returned the keys, he had been quiet in a way that was not his usual quiet, deliberate, like a man deciding how much to say. I opened the glove box. There was no medication. There was a white envelope sealed with black tape, my initials written across the front in my father's handwriting, and beneath it something small and silver. My hands would not stop shaking as I tore the envelope open. The note inside was written fast, the letters pressing hard into the paper like he had been running out of time even then. "Allie, if you find this, it means Ethan has already moved. Do not trust anyone at the agency. Do not trust his colleagues, his supervisors, or anyone who calls themselves your friend from that building. The USB drive contains everything. Case number 2149. Montana facility. You built the foundation for what they turned it into. You need to see what they did with your work. I love you more than I know how to say. Be careful. Be smart. Be my girl." I pressed the note against my mouth with both hands and squeezed my eyes shut. The tears came anyway, burning and fast running down my face and into my palms. A sound came out of me that I had no word for. Not quite a sob, not quite a scream, something between the two that filled the car for just 1 second before I swallowed it back down. I could not fall apart, not here, not yet. I sat up straight, wiped my face hard with the sleeve of my sweater, breathed. Then the radio came on by itself. I had not touched it. A calm, professional voice filled the car, reading the news with the flat certainty of someone delivering a weather forecast. Authorities are investigating what is now believed to be a deliberate explosion in a residential neighborhood in suburban Denver. Officials confirm there are no survivors. The home is registered to FBI Senior Agent Ethan Bell. His wife Allison Bell, age 30, and their son are presumed dead. Presumed dead. I looked at Mason in the rearview mirror. He had fallen asleep against the window, his breath fogging the glass in small rhythmic clouds. His small hands curled under his chin. Ethan had not just tried to kill us. He had already told the world he had succeeded. We were ghosts now, erased on paper, invisible to every system that might have protected us, which meant he could hunt us in the dark where no one was looking. I held the USB drive in my palm for a long time just looking at it. It was smaller than a thumbnail. Silver scratched along one edge, the kind of thing you could lose in a coat pocket and forget about for months. There was a strip of white tape across it, and on the tape my father's handwriting, again smaller this time, like he had been trying not to be seen writing it. Bell Case 2149. Montana Facility. I knew that case number. I had filed the physical paperwork myself 3 years ago, back when I still believed that the work I did at the FBI meant something clean and straightforward. It had been a prisoner transfer case, a man with documented psychological trauma pulled from a federal holding facility and handed over to a private contractor whose name I had never been given clearance to know. I had flagged it in the system as irregular. My supervisor at the time had called me into his office and told me to unflag it with a smile that I had read as patience and now understood as contempt. That supervisor had been Ethan. I pressed the heel of my hand against my sternum and held it there, breathing hard through my nose. My heart felt like something was physically squeezing it, rhythmic and merciless, refusing to let me catch my breath. 3 years. He had been in front of me for 3 years while I filed those documents, while I quietly wondered, while I told myself I was being paranoid and dramatic, and that I loved this man and he loved me, and that was a fact I could build a life on. What a fool I had been. What a devoted, trusting, deliberately blinded fool. The snow outside the rest stop came down harder now, thick enough that the lights at the edge of the parking area were blurred into soft halos. The world beyond the windshield had reduced itself to a small circle of visibility, everything past it swallowed by white. I felt sitting in that car exactly as exposed as I was, a woman alone on a dark road with a dead phone and a USB drive containing what I suspected was enough to destroy people with the power to destroy me first. "Mom," Mason's voice, sleepy and rough, came from the back seat. "Are we moving?" "Not yet." I cleared my throat hard and shoved the USB into my jacket pocket. "Go back to sleep, baby." "I don't want to sleep. My neck hurts from the seat." He shifted around, squirming the way he always did when he woke up, disoriented elbows going in every direction, blanket tangled around his legs. "Can we get food? My stomach hurts." "Soon." I turned around and looked at him properly. This boy who had his father's jawline and his grandfather's eyes, who had turned 8 years old tonight and had not gotten to blow out his candles, who had spent his birthday watching his house burn down from the back seat of a car. Something surged up in my chest, so fierce and sudden that it nearly closed my throat. Love and fury and grief, all three braided together into something with no clean name. "I'm going to take care of you. I need you to trust me right now." He studied my face with the particular seriousness of children who understand more than adults give them credit for. His brow furrowed. His voice went very careful. "Are you crying?" "A little." I did not look away. My eyes were burning and I let them. "But I'm okay. I promise you I'm okay. And I'm going to keep you safe no matter what. Do you hear me?" He reached forward over the back of the seat and patted my shoulder twice with the solemn deliberateness of someone much older than 8. "Okay, Mom," he said. "I believe you." I turned back around before he could see the tears actually fall. I pressed my fingers against my closed eyes for 3 seconds, then dropped my hands and started the car. My father had a cabin in Estes Park, an old place he had owned since before I was born, tucked up into the foothills, with a wood stove and a bad internet connection and a deadbolt that required a specific physical key. No digital component, nothing hackable, nothing that existed in any database. He had transferred the deed to a shell company 15 years ago, a habit from his decades in military intelligence that I had teased him about every time it came up. I had called him paranoid. I had told him the Cold War was over. I had never in my life been so grateful for someone else's paranoia. I pulled back onto the northbound highway, the wipers cutting steady arcs through the falling snow, the heater running full blast to keep Mason warm. For a while, there was nothing behind us but dark road and empty lane markers, and the occasional glow of a distant exit. I let myself breathe. I let my shoulders come down half an inch from where they had been living around my ears for the past 2 hours. I thought about Ethan. Not the version that had existed in my marriage, the man who made coffee in the morning and remembered my father's birthday and held my hand at movies. I thought about the version that had existed in parallel to that one in the offices and facilities and conference rooms I had never been cleared to enter. I thought about what it takes to run two lives that precisely for that long without a single seam showing. You would have to be very good at reading people. You would have to understand at a level below instinct exactly what each person needed to believe and how to give it to them. I was a behavioral analyst. I had spent my career studying exactly that kind of mind, and I had lived inside his house for 10 years without seeing it. Then the headlights appeared. Black SUV. Same distance as before. Same steady patient pace, not gaining, not dropping back. But this time, the positioning was different, not directly behind me, but offset to the left slightly outside the lane like something that wanted to be visible rather than hidden. I changed lanes, the SUV changed lanes. I eased off the gas. The SUV eased off. I pushed the speedometer hard to 85, and the SUV matched it exactly, no lag, no effort, as though keeping pace with me was a thing it could do indefinitely without trying. From the back seat, Mason had gone quiet again. I could see in the mirror that his eyes were open, watching the dark out the window with the stillness of a child who has decided that asking questions right now will not help anything. Then the SUV flashed its headlights. Twice. Slow and deliberate. Then the brights went off and it settled back to its original distance like nothing had happened. I waited for it to accelerate and cut me off, for the window to come down, for something to come out of it, for the situation to resolve into a clear threat I could respond to with a clear action. It did none of those things. It just drove, steady, patient, one lane over and 3 car lengths back, going exactly where I was going. It was not following me. It was not chasing me. It was showing me the way. And in all the fear I had carried since 7:42 that evening, this was the thing that frightened me most, not an enemy I could identify, but a guide I could not yet trust. The betrayal starts to unfold now. Before I reveal the dark secret she found on that drive comment, still here, so I know you're with me. Brace yourselves, because once you know this secret, there is no turning back. The real enemy is not who we thought it was. Please note the following part includes fictional elements for entertainment purposes. If you'd rather not hear it, you can turn off the video right now. The cabin sat at the end of a dirt road that the GPS on my phone did not recognize, which was exactly the point. By the time we arrived well past midnight, Mason had drifted off again in the back seat, his head tipped against the window, one sock still half off his foot. My father had bought it in 1989 cash, under a company name that had never been connected to him in any public record. He had told me once that every man who works in intelligence should have one place in the world that no system knows about. I laughed at him when he said it. I had called him dramatic. I had told him he had been reading too many spy novels. I was not laughing now. The SUV had disappeared 30 minutes outside of Estes Park, headlights blinking off without warning, leaving me alone on a mountain road with nothing but snow and silence, and the sound of my own breathing. I did not know what it had been. I did not know if it had been a threat or a lifeline. I pushed the question to the back of my mind and focused on driving. The cabin came into view just after midnight, dark and low against the tree line, a thin crust of snow on the roof and the wooden porch. I turned off the headlights and sat there for a moment with the engine idling, watching the windows for any sign of light or movement. There was none. I got out of the car and went to the loose brick at the base of the left porch post. My father had told me about the spare key when I was 17 on a camping trip as part of a longer conversation about what to do if things ever went wrong. I had stored the information away in that deep place where you keep things you hope you will never need. The key was there. I carried Mason inside over my shoulder, his dead weight warm and trusting against me. He did not wake up. I laid him on the old couch by the fireplace and covered him with a wool blanket that smelled like cedar and my childhood, and I stood there looking at his face for a long moment, with tears burning behind my eyes and my fist pressed hard against my mouth. He looked so much like Ethan when he slept. The same jaw, the same way his mouth relaxed into something peaceful. I had always thought it was beautiful. I turned away and went to the table. The cabin's walls were covered in the kind of quiet accumulation of a life well lived. Framed photographs, a military commendation in a wooden frame, a shelf of books with cracked spines, and on the mantel above the fireplace, A photo I had not seen before, my father, Mason, and me, at a park somewhere, all three of us laughing at something outside the frame. Ethan had taken the picture. He was not in it. The absence of him had never felt so accurate. I opened my laptop, plugged in the USB drive, and waited. A single folder appeared on the screen. It was labeled Project Helios, and beneath that label, in small red text, two words: Access Restricted. My hands were steadier now than they had any right to be. I clicked. The first file was a video. Grainy security footage, the kind that comes from a fixed ceiling camera, watching a room that contained a metal chair, a table, a man in civilian clothes whose hands were bound. A second man stood with his back to the camera, speaking in a low voice I could not make out clearly. On the table between them was a tablet, and on the tablet screen were what appeared to be text prompts, images, sequences of questions. I recognized the structure immediately, not because I had seen it used this way, because I had written it. No. The word came out of me as barely a breath. I leaned closer to the screen, my heart slamming against my ribs. No, no, no. The prompts on that tablet were mine. Verbatim, word for word, pulled directly from a behavioral conditioning framework I had developed during my second year at the FBI. It had been designed as a therapeutic tool, a method for helping trauma survivors rebuild cognitive patterns. I was proud of it. I had spent 11 months on it. I had given it to my supervisor with the belief that it would be used to help people. And here it was being used to take a bound man apart, question by question, systematically dismantling whatever was left of his sense of self. My stomach turned. I pressed both hands flat on the table to stop them from shaking. There were 14 video files in the folder. I could not watch them all. I could barely watch the first one. I clicked it closed and scrolled down to the next section, a personnel document. Names, clearance levels, operational roles. The list was long. I did not recognize most of the names. I scrolled to the bottom, and there it was. 4 words in plain black text, no different from any other line on the page, as ordinary as a grocery list. Project Director Ethan Bell. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table so hard the wood pressed white marks into my palms. A sound came out of my chest that I could not control, a sharp, broken thing, half gasp and half cry, loud enough that Mason shifted on the couch and murmured something in his sleep. I clapped my hand over my mouth. 10 years. 10 years of building a life with this man. 10 years of believing in his work, supporting his career, filing his paperwork, defending his late nights, and his distance, and his habit of shutting down whenever I asked too many questions. 10 years of giving my research to a man who was sitting on the other side of it, using every tool I had built with care and turned it into something designed to break human beings. I had given him everything I had, and he had used every single piece of it. The fire in the stove crackled. Outside, the snow fell without judgment. And I sat in my father's cabin in the dark, holding the proof that the man I had married was not the man I had loved. He had never been that man at all. The sound of tires on the dirt road outside the cabin sent me straight to the fireplace poker before I had finished the thought. I gripped it with both hands and positioned myself beside the front door, back flat against the wall, heart hammering so loud in my ears, I was certain whoever was outside could hear it. I glanced at Mason, still asleep on the couch, chest rising and falling in the slow rhythm of a child who has cried himself into exhaustion. His birthday shirt was still wrinkled. One sock had come half off his foot. I would die in this doorway before I let anyone through it. A knock, 3 times, deliberate spacing, then a voice low and careful. "Jules, it's Jack Ryland, don't throw anything at me." My entire body exhaled at once. I pulled the door open, poker still in my hand, because I was not fully convinced my ears could be trusted anymore. Jack Ryland stood on the porch with snow on his shoulders and both hands raised where I could see them, palms out. No sudden movements, the body language of someone who understands that the person in front of them has been through enough tonight to swing first and ask questions later. He was 33, lean and sharp-featured, with the kind of exhausted eyes that come from too many nights spent watching screens in dark rooms. He had been my colleague for 4 years. He was the only person at the bureau who had ever looked at me across a conference table like he knew something the rest of the room was missing. He was also, I was registering now, soaking wet from the knees down and shivering in a way he was clearly trying to hide. You look terrible, he said. You followed me here, I said. I was already here. I've been watching the cabin since 10 o'clock. He lowered his hands slowly, watching the poker with the patience of someone who is not going to argue about it. Can I come inside, or are we doing this on the porch in the snow? I stepped back. He came in, checked the window before he closed the door. A single practice sweep, eyes moving to the dark outside and back, and turned to look at me with an expression that managed to be both deeply sorry and completely focused at the same time. He looked at Mason on the couch. Something moved across his face that was brief and human and quickly set aside. How long have you known? I asked. My voice came out sharper than I intended, stripped of everything except the question. How long have you known about Ethan? Jack pulled out a chair at the table and sat down, lacing his fingers together in front of him. He did not look away from me when he answered, which I noted, because it was the kind of thing that matters. About the project 8 months, about what he did to your research, specifically 6, about tonight. He stopped, jaw tight. I found out 2 hours before the explosion. I tried to reach you. You weren't picking up. The words landed in my chest like something physical. I was making a birthday cake, I said. I know. His voice dropped. I know, Jules, and I am sorry. I am so sorry I couldn't get to you faster. I've been sitting with that since the moment I saw the smoke. I set the poker down against the wall and sat across from him. My legs were shaking, a deep, bone-level trembling that had nothing to do with cold and everything to do with the accumulated weight of everything my body had been absorbing since 7:42 in the evening. I had not realized until this exact moment how long I had been holding myself rigid. Tell me everything, I said. Right now, all of it. Don't manage it. Don't edit it. Just say it. Jack reached into his coat and pulled out a folded document, setting it on the table between us. The header read Echelon Industries, and beneath it, Project Helios Operational Summary, marked with a red diagonal stripe I recognized as the Bureau's classification for active black operations. I had processed paperwork with that stripe on it dozens of times without ever knowing that one of them had my name attached to it. Echelon is a private defense contractor, he said. They've been lobbying the Department of Defense for years to gain access to behavioral conditioning technology, not therapeutic applications. Interrogation, reprogramming, the kind of work that no oversight committee would ever approve through any official channel because it crosses lines that officially we agreed never to cross. So they needed someone on the inside. Ethan went to them. Jack's voice was flat in the way that means something is being controlled. He didn't wait to be recruited. He pitched it. He built the entire operational framework. He recruited the team, secured the funding through Echelon's black budget channels, and established Vantage 99 as the implementation site. He paused. And he used your research as the scientific foundation, because it was the most sophisticated behavioral conditioning framework in the Bureau's system, and because he stopped, and something moved across his face that looked a lot like fury that had been living behind his eyes for a long time. Because no one would question why the project director's wife had contributed to an internal behavioral study. Your name gave it legitimacy. Your work gave it methodology, and you didn't know any of it. I pressed both palms flat against the table. My eyes were burning, and my throat had gone so tight that swallowing hurt, but I held myself together by sheer force of needing to hear the rest of it. He used me as his cover. He used you as his credibility. Jack met my eyes and held them. There's a difference, and it matters. Cover is passive. Credibility is structural. The entire project is built on your name, Jules, which also means you're the only person who understands it well enough to dismantle it from the inside. The fire in the stove popped and shifted. A log settled. Mason murmured something in his sleep, and I looked at him automatically, the way mothers do when any sound comes from the direction of their child, checking, reassessing, filing away that he was still breathing, still safe, still here. My father, I said, turning back. He called me tonight. He knew what Ethan was going to do. He knew with enough time to warn me. I looked at Jack steadily. How did he know? Jack reached into his coat pocket a second time. He unfolded a second sheet slowly, and something in the deliberateness of it made my chest go cold before I had even seen what was on it. It was a detention record, Official Bureau format case number in the top right corner, authorization stamp at the bottom. The kind of paperwork that gets filed when someone is taken quietly without charges, without public record, the kind that exists in a system most people do not know exists. The name on the record was Richard Bell. The air went out of the room. He found out approximately 8 hours before the explosion, Jack said, and his voice was gentle now, in the specific way of someone delivering information they know will cause pain and want to cause as little of it as possible. We believe he intercepted a communication between Ethan and Cortez. He tried to get to you. He called you from a borrowed phone while he was already in motion. Jack stopped. They picked him up 40 minutes after that call ended. He's been in custody since. The sound that came out of me was not a word. It was something that had been building in my chest since 7:42 in the evening and had finally found the crack in the wall I had been holding up, forcing its way through low and jagged and entirely beyond my control. I pressed my fist hard against my mouth. My shoulders shook. My eyes burned so fiercely that the tears came fast and blinding before I could stop them, and for a long, terrible moment I did not try to stop them. My father had not simply warned me. He had known they would come for him the moment he made that call. He had known, and he had made it anyway, one single desperate phone call on a borrowed phone from a borrowed minute, and then they had taken him. For me. He had given everything he had left for 8 minutes in a warning. Jules, Jack's voice was quiet, not pushing, not pulling, just present. I brought myself back. I wiped my face hard with the sleeve of my jacket. I breathed. I looked at the table, at the detention record, at my father's name in black ink on official paper. Where is he? My voice broke cleanly on the last word, and I did not apologize for it. A facility in Pueblo, Jack said, 140 miles south of here. He slid the paper across the table toward me. They're calling it Vantage 99. I looked at the paper. I looked at my son sleeping on the couch with one sock half off his foot. His birthday ruined his house in ashes. His grandfather in a cell 140 miles away. I looked at the fireplace poker leaning against the wall. Tell me, I said, how we get him out. Jack cleared the kitchen table with one arm and unfolded a printout the size of a placemat, smoothing the creases with his palm. It was a facility layout, not the kind you find in any public record, but the kind that exists only in secure servers that require 3 separate clearances to access. The fact that Jack had it told me everything I needed to know about how long he had been working on this alone. Vantage 99 was built as a private research facility in 2019, he said, tapping the center of the diagram. Officially, it's listed as a materials testing site for a defense subcontractor. No residential address, no public footprint. The land is owned by a shell company that traces back to Echelon through 4 layers of incorporation. He looked up at me. Your tax dollars at work. How many personnel? On site at any given time between 20 and 30. Half security, half operational. They rotate every 72 hours. He tapped a section near the eastern wall. Single point of entry for authorized vehicles. Biometric screening at the gate, badge scan, inside camera coverage on every corridor except the service corridors. I pointed before he finished the sentence. He looked at me sharply. I leaned over the layout, tracing a path with my finger. These passages here between the main operational floor and the utility systems. They'd be in the camera blind spots because the behavioral monitoring algorithm I developed specifically excludes service personnel from surveillance flagging. It was a privacy compliance measure. I stopped. Ethan asked me to build it that way. He said it was to protect maintenance workers from being tracked unnecessarily. Jack stared at me. He had you build the blind spots into the system yourself. He had me build the blind spots into the system myself. Saying it out loud made something inside my chest clench so hard I had to breathe through it. That man planned everything, every single piece of it, years in advance. Which means you know exactly how to move through those corridors undetected. In theory, I straightened up. I know the algorithm. I don't know if they've updated it. They haven't. Jack pulled out his phone and showed me a timestamp on a code file. I pulled the current version 2 weeks ago. It's identical to the original. They haven't touched it because changing it would mean admitting it was designed with vulnerabilities, which would raise questions they don't want asked. For the first time since 7:42 in the evening, Something that was not fear or grief moved through me. It was small and unfamiliar, and it took me a moment to identify it. It was usefulness. The sensation of having something they needed me to have. All right. I sat down and pulled the layout closer. Walk me through the security rotation. We worked for the better part of an hour. The two of us bent over the table in the light of a single lamp, Jack explaining what he knew, and me filling in what only I could know. He had the external architecture. I had the internal logic. Together we built something that looked improbably like a plan. Mason woke up around 2 in the morning and appeared in the kitchen doorway in his socks hair flattened on one side, squinting against the light. "Mom, who's that?" "That's Jack," I said. "He's a friend, he's helping us." Mason studied Jack with the solemn evaluation of a child who has recently learned that not all adults can be trusted. "Are you good or bad?" he asked. Jack looked at him without any trace of condescension. "Good," he said. "Mostly." Mason seemed to find this acceptable. "Do we have any food? I'm really hungry." I found crackers and peanut butter in the back of the pantry, which were approximately 40% of the things Mason considered acceptable food. I made him eat at the counter while Jack and I kept working, and I listened to the sound of my son crunching crackers in the dark kitchen of my father's cabin, and felt the particular ache of a moment that is terrible and ordinary at the same time. We had a plan sketched out by 3 in the morning. It was not a good plan. It was the best plan available to two people with limited resources, no backup, and a 24 to 48-hour window before Ethan's people found us. I was explaining the third phase to Jack when my phone rang. Unknown number, no caller ID, nothing. Every nerve in my body went tight. "Answer it," Jack said quietly, already reaching for his own phone. "And keep your voice neutral." I answered. "Mrs. Bell." The voice on the other end was a woman's, smooth, composed, carrying the particular kind of authority that comes from never having needed to raise it. "My name is Maria Cortez. I'm calling because we have a mutual interest in resolving this situation quietly and professionally." My free hand found the edge of the table and gripped it. "I don't know who you are." "You will." The warmth in her voice was the manufactured kind, the kind that is placed there deliberately, the way furniture is placed in a room. "I represent the people who can make your father very comfortable or very uncomfortable, depending on the choices you make in the next few hours. I think it would be worth your time to hear what I have to offer." "How did you get this number?" A pause, and then soft and precise and designed to terrify Mrs. Bell. "We've known exactly where you are since you turned onto the Estes Park access road. I'm not calling to threaten you. I'm calling because I want you to understand the shape of your situation before you make a decision you cannot walk back from." The call ended. I set the phone down on the table. My hands were shaking again badly, the kind of shaking that no amount of willpower can override. She had known exactly where I was. She had known the entire time. And she had called to make sure I understood that. I pulled the SIM card out of my phone, snapped it in half over my knee, and dropped both pieces into the gap between the floorboards. Jack watched me do it without comment. He reached into his bag and handed me a prepaid phone, still in its packaging, the kind that gas stations sell for $40. "Already loaded with 3 numbers," he said. "Mine a secure relay line and 911 if everything else goes wrong." "If everything goes wrong, 911 won't help us." "No," he agreed, "but it'll feel like we tried." We switched cars in the dark of the cabin driveway, moving our things into Jack's rental, a gray sedan with Colorado plates and nothing remarkable about it. Mason carried his own blanket, dragging it along the snow-dusted ground with the particular determination of a child who has decided that at least this one thing will be under his control. "Jack," Mason said, loading himself into the back seat. "Does your car have heat?" "Full blast," Jack said. "Good." Mason buckled himself in with great ceremony. "Our car had heat, but Mom drives with the window cracked and I always get cold." Jack glanced at me over the roof of the car. I pressed my lips together. "I like fresh air," I said. "Get in the car, Mason." We drove south out of Estes Park before 4 in the morning, the mountains dark on either side of us, the road empty and straight. Mason fell asleep within 20 minutes, blanket pulled to his chin, and the car settled into the particular quiet of a long drive through the dark. Jack drove. I sat in the passenger seat with the facility layout on my knee and the prepaid phone in my hand, and my father's voice looping in my memory the way sounds do when you are trying not to lose them. Be careful, be smart, be my girl. He never liked Ethan, I said. Jack kept his eyes on the road. No, he was polite. He was always polite because that was how he was raised, and because he knew I loved him, and he did not want to be the reason I doubted something that made me happy. I looked out the window at the dark shapes of passing trees. But there was always something. A held breath when Ethan walked in the room. A split second of something in his face that he'd cover before I could identify it. He saw it before you did. He saw it before I let myself. My throat tightened. There's a difference. Jack did not push on it, and I was grateful for that. We hit the false checkpoint about 60 miles south of Estes Park, just as the sky was beginning to go gray at the edges. It was not a real law enforcement checkpoint. The placement was wrong. No advance warning signage. The two vehicles blocking the road were dark and unmarked, and the man who walked toward us was wearing tactical gear without any visible badge or agency insignia. Jack's hand moved to the center console before the man reached the car. Don't react, he said quietly. Let me handle it. The man knocked on Jack's window. Jack lowered it 2 inches. This road is temporarily closed, the man said. We're going to need you to turn around. Sure thing, Jack said easily, reaching toward the dashboard with his free hand. He pressed something below the steering column, a small device I had not noticed before, and the man's radio made a sharp static burst. The man grabbed for it instinctively, pressing his earpiece in, looking confused. Jack put the car in reverse, back 20 feet, then cut the wheel hard and came off the road into a field, bumping across frozen earth with the headlights off, until we hit a service track I could barely see in the dark. He drove it without hesitation. You knew that was there, I said. I mapped every alternate route yesterday. He got back onto a paved surface 2 miles later, hands perfectly steady on the wheel. I've been planning this longer than you have. Mason jolted awake in the back seat. What happened? Why are we bouncing? Shortcut, Jack said. That was not a shortcut, Mason said with great authority. A shortcut is when you go faster. That was slower and bumpier. You're right, Jack said. I'll take the feedback on board. Mason nodded as though this was the correct response and pulled his blanket back up. We reached the outer edge of Pueblo just before 7 in the morning. Jack navigated through the industrial district without looking at his phone, turning down side roads, flanked by chain-link fencing and rusted signage, until we arrived at the end of a dead-end street, and a structure that had once been a steel processing facility, shuttered since 2011, according to the faded notice board beside the gate. The gate was unlocked. Jack and I exchanged a look. He went in first, and I stayed close with Mason's hand gripped in mine, his small fingers warm and trusting around my cold ones. Inside the building was enormous and mostly dark, full of the kind of industrial silence that has weight to it. Columns of pale morning light fell through gaps in the roofing. Old machinery sat along the walls like sleeping animals. In the center of the floor, a folding table, 2 chairs, a lamp running off a portable battery still on, a paper coffee cup sitting in the middle of the table. I pressed my palm against the side of the cup. Still warm. Someone had been here within the last 30 minutes. Someone who had known we were coming, or who had been watching for us, or who had left in a hurry when they heard the car on the gravel outside. Jack, I said very carefully. I see it, he said. We were not alone in this building, and whoever else was here had not left. Jack moved through the building the way men move when they have been trained to low, quiet checking angles before committing to them, one hand near his jacket at all times. I stayed behind him with Mason pressed close to my side, his hand gripped in both of mine, his breathing quick and shallow against my arm. The building was enormous and mostly dark, the kind of industrial space that feels like it has forgotten what it was built for. Rust crept up the support columns. The machinery along the walls sat cold and inert shapes like prehistoric animals in the dim light. Morning was coming in through the gaps in the roofing, pale thin, not quite enough to see by, just enough to make the shadows more specific. We covered the floor in under 4 minutes, every corner, every shadow behind the old equipment, every doorway leading to a secondary room. We found a foreman's office with a broken window and a calendar on the wall still showing October of 2011, the month the facility closed. We found a bathroom with no running water, We found a storage area with shelves still holding empty plastic containers labeled with chemical names I did not recognize. We found nothing that should not have been there. Nothing except the table. Whoever had been sitting at that table with that cup of coffee had gone out through a back exit. We found propped open with a brick, a standard red clay brick. The kind that comes from any hardware store. The kind that tells you nothing. And they had not left any trace of themselves beyond the warmth still fading from the paper cup. Jack pulled the back door shut and turned to look at me. Could be a coincidence. Someone using the building for shelter. In Pueblo, I said. In December. At a facility with a manually unlocked gate and no visible signs of forced entry. I shook my head. This was deliberate. Someone wanted us to find this place. Or someone knew we were coming here and cleared out before we arrived. His eyes moved to the table and back to me. Either way, we're not alone in this. Neither of those options felt safe. I filed both of them behind everything else I was carrying and turned my attention to the table. Beside the coffee cup partially hidden under the edge of the table was a manila envelope with no markings on the outside. No name, no address, no stamp. I picked it up with 2 fingers the way you pick up something you are not certain about. Heavy, stiff, the kind of weight that comes from multiple documents folded together and pressed flat. Mom! Mason tugged my sleeve from behind me. Can I go look at the big machines? Stay where I can see you, I said without looking up from the envelope. Both feet on the ground, nothing touching. I know. He dropped my hand and drifted toward the nearest piece of machinery, hands clasped behind his back, in a performance of restraint that lasted approximately 4 seconds before I heard him touch something metal, and the sound it made when he tapped it experimentally. Mason. I'm not touching it. I'm testing the acoustics. Jack made a sound that might have been a laugh in different circumstances. I opened the envelope. Inside was a collection of documents that someone had assembled with care, printed pages, some with the FBI header in the top corner, some bearing the Echelon Industries logo I had already come to associate with everything that had gone wrong. All of them carried classification markings that told me immediately they had not come through any legitimate disclosure channel. Someone had pulled these documents at personal risk from systems that logged every access in an institution that did not forget. The first page was a prisoner transfer record. My eyes went to the date 3 days ago, to the prisoner's name, Richard Bell, Colonel, United States Army, retired, to the transfer destination, Vantage 99, Pueblo, Colorado, and then to the authorizing signature at the bottom of the page, Special Agent Ethan Bell, my husband's signature. His handwriting. The same hand that had written happy birthday on Mason's card every year. The same hand that had signed our mortgage and our marriage license, and the card attached to the flowers he sent me when my mother died. The same hand that had signed the paperwork locking my father in a cell. I set the page down flat on the table with both hands and stood there with my eyes closed for a count of 5, breathing in through my nose and out through my mouth, the way my father had taught me when I was small and the world was overwhelming and I needed to stay in my body. Jules, Jack's voice pulled me back. He was looking at the second document, his expression the controlled, tight version that meant he was working to keep something contained. Look at this. It was a memo. Internal echelon formatting, the kind that exists in secure servers behind 3 layers of authentication, the kind that is never supposed to see the color of daylight or the eyes of anyone outside its intended distribution list. The subject line read, Bell Situation Revised Protocol. The body was 8 lines long. Clinical, brief. Written in the flat bureaucratic language of people who have trained themselves to discuss human beings the way they discuss logistics. Colonel Bell attempted to warn the subject before extraction could be completed. Recommend indefinite detention at Vantage 99 pending resolution of the Bell file. Colonel Bell remains useful as leverage. Agent Bell has been informed and approves the protocol. I read the last line 3 times. Agent Bell approves the protocol. He signed off on it, I said. The words came out of me slowly and with great precision because if I moved them too fast, they would break something on the way out. He signed off on holding my father as leverage against me. Jack set the document down carefully. He did not try to soften it, or contextualize it, or give me a reason to read it differently. He just let it be what it was, which was the only honest thing anyone could do with it. Mason had come back to stand a few feet away, and I could feel him watching me with the particular attention of a child who has learned to read the temperature of his parents' silence. I did not look at him. I could not look at him and hold myself together at the same time, and I needed to hold myself together. The last item in the envelope was not a document. It was a USB drive, and taped to it was a strip of paper with 6 words written in a hand I did not recognize. Deliberate letters, careful spacing. Watch the footage, then you'll understand. Beneath the USB drive, pressed flat against the bottom of the envelope, was a laminated access card. The photo on it was blurred and low resolution. The name printed below it read E. Bell, Designation Deputy Director Operational Division Vantage Industrial Research. I looked at Jack. He nodded once, already opening his laptop. I plugged the drive in. A single video file opened without prompting. Security camera footage ceiling mounted the timestamp in the upper right corner reading 36 hours ago. The room it showed was white-walled and harshly lit with the flat overhead lighting of a space designed for function rather than comfort, the kind of room that is easy to clean because cleaning is anticipated. A metal chair bolted to the floor, a man in it. My father. My hand went to my mouth before I had decided to put it there. He was upright. That was the first thing I registered, and I held on to it. He was upright. He had not been broken down into a position of submission. He was still sitting straight in the chair, the way he had sat straight at every dinner table of my childhood. His hands were secured behind him, and there was bruising along his left jaw, and above his right eye, dark and swollen, and his lip was split at the corner. But his eyes were open. He was looking directly at whoever stood in front of him, with an expression I had seen him wear my entire life, the particular set of the jaw and stillness of the face that meant he had made a decision that he was not going to give anyone the satisfaction of watching him break. The person in front of him had their back to the camera, medium height, dark jacket. The way they stood, one shoulder slightly lower than the other, weight distributed to the left, a habit I had watched so many times, I could have drawn it from memory. I knew that posture. I had studied it across pillows and dinner tables in 10 years of a shared life. The person turned their head slightly, and the camera caught his profile clean. Ethan was not bruised. He was not restrained. He was not a man who had been turned on by his colleagues or caught in someone else's machinery or punished for trying to protect me. He was holding a length of metal chain in his left hand, the end of it resting on the concrete floor, and he was speaking to my father in a voice too low for the camera to pick up clearly, unhurried, patient, the voice of someone with nowhere to be and all the time available. I stopped the video. My knees went. Not gradually all at once the way structural things fail when the load exceeds the limit. I grabbed the edge of the table with both hands, and Jack was there immediately, his hands on my arms holding me upright, while my legs remembered what they were for. I had been telling myself in the cabin, in the car, in every dark, quiet moment since the night before, that at least there was distance. That at least the man I had married was not the man personally doing the worst of what was being done. That the worst of it was being done by people I had never known, in rooms I had never seen, and that the version of Ethan I had loved existed somewhere apart from that. There was no distance. There had never been any distance at all. He was the one holding the chain. Jack held my arm until my legs remembered what they were for. I straightened up slowly, pressing the heels of my hands against my eyes, breathing through my mouth in long, deliberate counts, the way my father had taught me when I was 7 years old and afraid of thunderstorms. In through the nose, out through the mouth. 4 counts each. Keep going until the world stops spinning. The world took longer than usual to stop spinning. Jules, Jack's voice was careful. Take whatever time you need. I don't have time. I dropped my hands and looked at him. My eyes felt raw and swollen, and I did not care. How long until they move him to a different location? Based on the rotation schedule, we have a window between 40 and 60 hours from now. Then we don't have time. I pulled in a breath that shook only a little on the way in. Where do we sleep tonight? We drove 2 miles to a roadside motel that took cash and did not ask for identification, which was the only kind of motel that mattered right now. Jack got us 1 room with 2 beds. Mason fell asleep in under 10 minutes, still in his clothes, his arm thrown over his face, the way he always slept when he was truly exhausted. I sat on the edge of the other bed with the locket my father had given me on my 21st birthday open in my palm. It was a small silver thing, plain and oval, nothing remarkable about it. My name was engraved on the inside of the front panel in letters so small you had to tilt it to read them. I had carried it every day for 9 years. Jack sat in the chair by the window, reading through the Vantage 99 layout for what I estimated was the 12th time. He looked up when he noticed I hadn't moved. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I'm thinking about how Ethan gave me this." I turned the locket over in my fingers. "He didn't. My father gave me this. Ethan gave me a bracelet I lost 2 years ago and never thought about again." I closed my fist around the locket. I had them confused in my memory. Isn't that something? Jack did not answer, which was the right thing to do. "I keep trying to find the moment," I said. "The specific moment when I should have known. When the evidence was clear enough that I had no excuse. And every time I find a candidate, I find a reason I explained it away." I looked at him. That's what he counted on. He didn't hide from me. He just made sure that every time I got close to seeing him clearly, there was something warmer and more believable right next to the truth. And I chose the warmer thing every single time. "That's not weakness," Jack said. "It got my father chained to a chair." The room went quiet. From the other bed, Mason made a small sound in his sleep, turning over, and I looked at him for a long moment, with the particular helpless ferocity of a parent who cannot protect their child from everything and knows it. "Mom!" Mason's voice was blurry with sleep. He had not fully woken up, just surfaced briefly the way children do. "Are you still there?" "Right here, baby." I went to his bed and sat on the edge of it, putting my hand on his back the way I had since he was an infant. "Go back to sleep. Is Grandpa okay?" His voice was barely a murmur now, already sinking. "I'm going to make sure he is." I felt the words move through my chest as I said them, not as a comfort for him, but as a decision I was making out loud. "I promise." He was asleep before I finished the sentence. I went back to the table and opened the locket all the way. The hinge was tight and deep enough, and the micro SD card Jack had given me earlier in the evening fit inside the cavity behind the photo panel with less than a millimeter to spare when closed. I clicked it shut, opened it, clicked it shut again. When I plugged into the Vantage 99 server and copied the Helios core data, this locket would be around my neck. Ethan would be looking for a drive. He would be looking for a device. He would be looking for something that looked like evidence. He would not be looking at my jewelry. He had spent 10 years underestimating the specific ways I was smarter than he gave me credit for. Tonight, that ended. I was not going in there to survive. I was going in there to finish it. We left Mason with the motel manager, a woman named Darlene, who had kind eyes and a grandmotherly disposition, and who accepted $300 in cash to let a small boy watch cartoons in her office for a few hours without asking a single question about where his parents were going. Mason, for his part, accepted this arrangement with the pragmatic flexibility of a child who has learned in the past 48 hours that the world does not always operate according to its usual rules. "Will you be back before lunch?" he asked. "Before lunch," I promised him. I hugged him tighter than I needed to and held on a beat longer than usual. My face pressed into his hair, memorizing the particular warmth of him, the way you memorize things when some part of you understands that nothing is guaranteed. "I love you," I told him. "I love you too, Mom." He patted my back. "You can let go now." I let go. I walked to the car. I did not look back because I was not sure I would keep walking if I did. Vantage 99 sat at the end of a service road on the eastern edge of the industrial district, behind 2 layers of chain-link fencing topped with razor wire and a gate system that required electronic authorization and biometric verification. From the outside, it looked like exactly what it claimed to be, a nondescript facility, with no visible signage beyond a small placard reading Vantage Industrial Research. The kind of building that a person could drive past 100 times without once wondering what happened inside it. Jack parked the car a quarter-mile back behind the cover of an adjacent building. The sky was still dark, 5:30 in the morning, the temperature sitting at 12 degrees and dropping. "You have 20 minutes from the moment I create the diversion," Jack said, going over it one final time. "The service corridor runs the length of the east wing. The blind spots are every 40 feet, just like the layout showed. Stay in them and move fast." "I know." I touched the locket at my throat. Still there, still closed. When you get to Containment 3, you have maybe 4 minutes before the internal response team reaches that corridor. He met my eyes. Jules, if something goes wrong in there, nothing is going to go wrong. I'm serious. If something goes wrong, you take your father and you leave. You do not wait for the data. You do not try to fix it. You walk out. Jack, I mean it. I know you mean it. I held his gaze. And I am telling you that nothing is going to go wrong because I am not giving Ethan the option. He looked at me for the moment in the dark of the car, and then he nodded once, the kind of nod that means I disagree with your certainty, but I respect your decision. I got out of the car. The access card Jack had found in the manila envelope at the steel mill was registered to Ethan's administrative profile, giving entry-level access under the designation Deputy Director Operational Division. I had added one layer to it myself during the night, using a technique I had learned from a cybersecurity consultant 3 years ago and had filed away in that same deep place where I kept information I hoped never to need. The outer gate reader accepted the card without hesitation. Green light, a soft click, the gate rolled back. I walked through with my shoulders straight and my pace steady, the way someone walks when they belong somewhere. My heart was slamming so hard I was certain it was audible. My hands were steady. I had made them steady through the sheer force of thinking about my father's face on that security footage upright in a metal chair refusing to break. The main entrance required biometric screening. I placed the card against the secondary reader at the side panel, the one designated for accompanying personnel and administrative spouses, the one that bypassed the fingerprint scanner and substituted a photo verification instead. The photo on the card was a blurred internal headshot standard issue, low resolution, the kind that security personnel glance at and wave through in the early hours of the morning when their attention is elsewhere. The door opened. The corridor inside was long and white, and lit with the particular flat brightness of spaces designed to have no atmosphere. The smell hit me immediately, antiseptic and recycled air, and something underneath it that I could not name, but that made something deep in my chest recoil. I turned left at the first intersection into the service corridor. The camera above the intersection swept right, then left, then settled into its holding position. I counted 3 seconds, then moved into the 40-foot stretch of blind space, and kept moving, pressing close to the wall, footsteps soft on the concrete. The algorithm I had built did not flag movement in the service corridors. It categorized those zones as maintenance traffic and filtered them from the active monitoring feed. I had built it that way to comply with privacy regulations. Ethan had asked me to build it that way because he had always known this day would come, the day when someone who understood the system needed to move through it unseen. He had just assumed that someone would be him. The alarm went off at 5:43. Gunfire, 2 shots coming from the main hall at the opposite end of the building. Voices shouting. The overhead lights shifted from white to red, bathing the corridor in the color of everything that was at stake. Jack had started the diversion. I pressed forward into the red-lit dark, the locket warm against my chest. My father's voice in my memory telling me to be smart, be careful, be his girl. I was all 3. The corridor outside Containment 3 had the particular quality of silence that comes from soundproofing, not absence of noise, but the active suppression of it, the feeling of sound being swallowed before it can travel. My footsteps made almost nothing on the concrete floor. The alarm was still cycling somewhere in the main hall, its pulse reduced here to a distant throb. Red light bleeding under the doors every 3 seconds like a slow heartbeat. I counted the doors on my left. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5th door. It was heavier than a standard interior door, reinforced steel, set into a plain drywall frame, designed to look unremarkable from the outside. The kind of door that hides in plain sight, because the people who built this facility understood that the most effective concealment is the appearance of nothing worth noticing. A keypad on the wall beside it, a small indicator light currently red. I pressed Ethan's access card against the reader. The light turned green. I pushed the door open, and I walked into the worst thing I had ever seen. The room was white, square, lit from above with the kind of overhead panel lighting that leaves no shadows anywhere, no softness, no place for the eye to rest. The kind of lighting designed to remove comfort as a variable. There was a drain in the center of the floor, and a metal chair bolted directly over it, And in the chair with his wrists secured behind him, and a cut above his right eye that had dried dark rust brown against his skin, sat my father. I made a sound I had not planned to make, brief, involuntary. He looked up when the door opened. His eyes found mine through the white light, and something moved across his face. Relief and devastation, arriving in exactly the same instant, occupying the same space, the expression of a man who is genuinely glad to see someone and genuinely heartbroken that they came. Allie. His voice came out rough and low, abraded at the edges. You shouldn't be here. I know. My throat had closed so completely the words barely fit through it. I crossed the room toward him and crouched down to his level, close enough to see the full extent of the bruising along his jaw, the split at the corner of his mouth, the way he was holding his left side slightly stiff. My eyes burned viciously. I'm getting you out of here. Allie, listen to me. There are people in the building. How touching. The voice came from the far corner of the room behind a secondary door I had not fully registered when I came in. I spun gun up and watched Ethan step out of the shadow along the wall with his hands loosely at his sides and no urgency in any part of his body. He was wearing a dark jacket with the sleeves rolled to the elbows, the way he always rolled them when he was working, when he was settled into something and expected to be there for a while. He looked exactly like the man I had married. He looked exactly like the man who had held my hand through 2 miscarriages and slow danced with me in our kitchen on a Tuesday night for no reason, except that a song he liked had come on the radio. In his right hand, loosely, the way someone carries something they are entirely comfortable with, hung a length of steel chain. My arm was up and this gun was level and pointing at the center of his chest before I had consciously told it to move. My arm was not shaking. I was more surprised by that than by almost anything else that had happened in the last 2 days. Put it down, Jules, Ethan said in the tone of someone who has already done the math. We both know you're not going to shoot me. Don't call me that. The words came out of me low and cold, and with more steadiness than I knew I possessed. Put the chain down and step away from him. Right now. Ethan set the chain down on the floor with a deliberate, unhurried clank. He did not step away from my father. He crossed his arms instead, tilting his head slightly the way he did when he found something mildly interesting. You know I've been modeling this scenario for months, he said. Your approach vector, your likely entry point, whether you'd bring Ryland or come alone. His eyes moved over me with the detached assessment of someone reviewing a report. You're 14 minutes ahead of my most optimistic projection. That's genuinely impressive, Jules. Ethan. My father's voice came out sharp despite everything, despite the bruising and the restraints, and however many hours he had been sitting in this room. Stop talking to her like she's a variable in your calculations. Ethan looked at him, Colonel, with respect. She is my daughter. My father sat forward against the restraints, the tendons in his forearms standing out from the effort his jaw set in the expression I had watched him wear through 38 years of military service, the absolute refusal to be diminished by anything a room could do to him. She has never been yours. You borrowed her. You constructed a version of yourself that she could love, and you stood inside it long enough to take everything she had, and then you detonated it. That is not marriage. That is not even cruelty. That is just theft dressed in a suit. Ethan looked at my father for a long moment. Then he looked back at me, and the expression on his face was the one I had spent a decade reading as emotional depth, as the particular reserve of a complicated man who felt things too precisely to express them easily. I understood now what it was. It was the face of someone who had never felt anything at all and had studied the appearance of feeling so carefully for so long that the performance had become invisible even to him. Why? The word came out of me before I decided to say it. Not an accusation. A genuine question, the one that had been sitting in the center of my chest since 7:42 the previous evening. Not the operational reasoning. Not Echelon and the money. Why did it have to be me? Why did it have to be my work, my name, my son? Ethan considered the question with the mildly engaged expression of someone being asked to explain something they find basic. Because you were the best, he said. Your research was the most sophisticated behavioral framework in the Bureau's entire system, and it was sitting there attached to your name, which was attached to mine, which made it untouchable by any internal auditor. I didn't need a cover. I needed credibility. You were the most credible person I had ever met. He paused. I told you that on our second date, if you remember. I wasn't lying. I was planning. My throat had closed so completely that swallowing hurt. My gun arm did not move. You tried to kill us, I said. I tried to simplify a situation that had become complicated. He said it with the same mild tone he had used to explain everything else, the tone of a man discussing a scheduling conflict. The timing was miscalculated by 11 minutes. You were never supposed to be in the house when the charges went off. That was a logistical error, not intent. The sound that came out of my chest was not a word. It was something that existed before language, a compressed, jagged, involuntary sound that came from somewhere I had not known was still holding anything. 11 minutes, my son's life and my own measured in 11 minutes of miscalculation. Let my father go. I said each word separately with full weight. Right now, cut the restraints and step away from him. I don't think so. Ethan reached behind him and lifted something from the table against the far wall. A portable hard drive, matte black compact, the kind of device that looks like nothing until you understand what it contains. He held it up at eye level, perfectly steady. Complete Helios operational archive. Every file, every video, every name, every offshore transfer, every authorization signature going back 4 years. He turned it slowly like something on display. Then he lowered it toward the industrial space heater glowing orange at his feet, close enough that the heat shimmer rose visible between it and his fingers. The question before us is very simple. You came here for your father. You came here for this. You cannot have both. So, my father was still in the chair. My gun was still raised. The only evidence that could end everything Ethan had built was suspended over an open heat source by the man who built it. He smiled at me with the face I had loved for 10 years. What are you going to choose, Jules? The answer I gave him was not the one he expected. The drive, I said. I choose the drive. Something shifted in Ethan's expression. A micro flicker of satisfaction quickly smoothed over. He had predicted this. He had calculated that I would prioritize evidence over sentiment, that the analytical part of my brain would override the emotional part, that I would choose the data that could put him in prison over the father who was already in the room. He thought he knew exactly how I was built. He was wrong about that in the most important way. I lunged forward toward the heat source, arms out, gun lowered, making every part of my body language say that I was coming for that drive with everything I had. Ethan dropped it. Not toward the heat, toward the floor away from me, a calculated throw designed to make me scramble and overshoot and lose my balance. 3 guards who had been positioned along the far wall moved at once, converging on the space between me and the drive, blocking my path, arms out. My hand was already at my throat. I pivoted left. Hard. In the half-second that every set of eyes in the room was tracking the drive across the floor, I crossed the distance to my father's chair in 4 steps, pulled the folding knife from my jacket pocket, and cut through the zip ties securing his left wrist. Then the right. The whole thing took less than 5 seconds. Up, I said, right now, on your feet. Alley. On your feet, Dad, I need you moving. He pushed himself upright with a grunt of pain that made my chest clench, and I got my shoulder under his arm and took as much of his weight as I could, which was more than I expected, because adrenaline is a remarkable thing. The door behind us burst open. Jack came through it at speed, shoulder first, and the guard nearest the door went down hard. Jack was bleeding from somewhere along his hairline, a thin, dark line running down the side of his face, but his hands were steady, and his eyes were clear, and he moved through the room like someone who had done this before and had every intention of doing it again. Time to go, he said, not particularly quietly. Ethan's voice cut across the chaos, sharp and furious, for the first time since I had walked through the door. The careful composure was gone, replaced by something harder and less controlled underneath. Stop them. Both doors. Nobody leaves this room. The drive was still on the floor. One of the guards had scooped it up and was holding it toward Ethan, and Ethan took it and held it up and looked at me across the room with an expression that was trying to rebuild itself into superiority and not quite managing it. You made your move, he said. I still have everything that matters. You have a drive, I said. Jack was already moving my father toward the back door, the one that connected to the service corridor. I backed toward them, keeping my eyes on Ethan, keeping the gun level. Ethan looked down at the drive in his hand. Something crossed his face, not quite doubt, but the first shadow of it. Jules. His voice was different now, quieter. The performance was gone, and underneath it was something that might in another lifetime have been the real thing. Whatever you think you have, it's not enough. Walk away from this. Take Mason somewhere quiet and walk away. I will not come after you. That is the only offer I will ever make. My eyes burned. My jaw ached from how hard I was clenching it. You tried to kill my son, I said. You chained my father to a chair. You took 11 years of my life and used every piece of it. I stepped through the doorway into the corridor. There is no version of this where I walk away, Ethan. There is only the version where you answer for it. I pulled the door shut behind me. The service corridor was red lit and smelled of smoke from whatever Jack had started in the main hall. My father was moving under his own steam now, hand pressed against the wall for balance, jaw set and eyes forward. Jack covered our rear, glancing back every few steps. He's going to check that drive, Jack said low and fast. I know. When he does, I know. I touched the locket at my throat, closed, warm, everything intact inside it. Let him check it. Behind us, through the sealed door, I heard Ethan's voice crack open into something raw. Then a single shot, close and sharp ringing off the corridor walls. Jack made a sound through his teeth and his right hand went to his shoulder, pressing hard. He did not slow down. We moved through the blind corridor in the rhythm of people who do not have time to be afraid, which is the only rhythm that gets you out of places like this alive. Behind us, through the sealed door, I heard Ethan's voice rise, not the measured, calculated tone of the man who had smiled at me across the room, but something rawer and louder, stripped of every layer of performance. He had opened the drive. He had found what was on it, which was 48 hours of decoy files I had loaded during the night, copied from publicly available FBI records that contained nothing actionable, nothing classified, nothing that could hurt anyone. I had built the blind spots in his system. I had hidden the real data in a locket around my neck, and I had given him an empty drive to celebrate over while I walked my father out of his building through a corridor he did not know existed. Let him celebrate. He had just won nothing. And somewhere in the distance, a man who had spent 10 years believing he was the smartest person in any room was learning what it felt like to be wrong about that. The service corridor exit led out onto a concrete loading dock at the back of the facility, and the cold hit me like a wall-sharp, dry Colorado winter air that went straight through my jacket and stole the breath from my lungs. My father stumbled on the last step, and I caught him by the arm, and for a moment, we stood there in the gray, early morning light, both of us breathing hard, the facility humming behind us, the alarm still cycling its red pulse through every window. Jack, I said looking back. Jack, move. Jack came through this door 5 seconds after us, and in those 5 seconds, something had changed. He was holding his left arm across his chest, his hand pressed against his right shoulder, and between his fingers I could see dark red soaking through the fabric of his jacket. I'm fine, he said immediately, which was what people said when they were not entirely fine. You've been shot. Grazed. He kept moving, steering us both off the loading dock and along the back wall of the building. There's a difference. Keep moving, Jules. They're going to come out that door in approximately 90 seconds, and I'd very much like to not be standing next to it when they do. We moved. My father was steadier on his feet than I expected, though every few steps he made a sharp sound through his teeth that told me the bruising across his ribs was worse than it looked. I kept my shoulder under his arm and matched his pace, and Jack covered our 6 with his good arm, glancing back, counting seconds under his breath. The rental car was where we had left it, a quarter-mile back, invisible behind the adjacent building. I got my father into the passenger seat and Jack into the back, and I had the engine running before either door was fully shut. I drove. I did not look back at Vantage 99. There was nothing there I needed to see anymore. We were 2 miles out when my father spoke. Your mother would have hated all of this, he said. His voice was rough and quiet and entirely serious. She would have been furious with me for getting caught, and then she would have made everyone soup. A laugh came out of me that I had not planned for, sharp and brief and real, the kind that surprises you. She absolutely would have. She would have liked who you've become. He turned his head to look at me, and his eyes were wet in a way that Richard Bell, Colonel, United States Army, retired, would never in his life have voluntarily acknowledged. I'm sorry, Allie. I'm sorry I didn't get to you sooner. I'm sorry I trusted him as long as I did. Dad, let me say it. His jaw tightened. I walked that man into our family. I gave him my blessing. I shook his hand and told him to take care of you. The words came out of him like something that had been under pressure for a very long time. I will spend the rest of my life being sorry for that. You didn't know, I said. I should have. Dad. I reached over, without taking my eyes off the road, and put my hand over his, which was cold and still. You called me. On 8 minutes of borrowed time with people coming for you, you called me and you got us out of that house. You did that. I squeezed his hand once hard. That's what I'm going to remember. He did not answer for a moment. Then he turned his hand over and held mine back, the grip of a man who has lived a long time and lost things he cannot recover and has decided that what remains is worth holding on to. From the back seat, Jack said, "For the record, I'm still bleeding back here." "I know," I said. "We're going to fix it. I'm just noting it for the log." Noted. We drove in the direction of the motel, and the sun was beginning to come up properly now over the eastern plains of Colorado, pale gold and enormous, the kind of sunrise that has no interest in whether the night before was good or terrible, and rises with equal indifference either way. My father looked out the window at it. Then he looked at me. "Is it over?" he asked. I reached up and unclasped the locket from around my neck. I held it out on my palm and clicked it open, and the micro SD card inside caught the morning light and held it, a small silver rectangle containing every crime, every signature, every video, every name. My father stared at it. He had every advantage, I said. He had the access and the resources and 10 years of knowing exactly how I thought. I closed my fingers around the locket. But he built Helios on my research. He used my algorithm to hide his blind spots. He forgot that the only person who knew every flaw in that system was the person who designed it. I looked at my father. He underestimated me, and now I have everything. From the back seat, Jack made a sound that was either a laugh or a wince, probably both. My father looked at the locket in my hand. Then he looked at me. And for the first time in 48 hours, Richard Bell smiled. Darlene was watering a plastic plant on the front desk when we walked into the motel lobby, and she looked up at the three of us, me with dried tears on my face, my father with a bruised jaw and torn sleeve, Jack holding his arm against his chest with a jacket that was not the right color anymore, and she said very calmly, "I'll go get the boy." Mason came out of her office at a run. He hit me at full speed, both arms around my waist. His face pressed into my ribs, and I went down onto one knee and held him with everything I had, my face in his hair, my eyes squeezing shut every muscle I had been holding rigid for the past 12 hours, releasing all at once in a wave that moved through me, from the top of my head to the soles of my feet. "Mom." His voice was muffled against my jacket. "You smell like smoke." "I know, baby, and you're squeezing too hard." "I know that too." I loosened my arms by approximately nothing. "Give me one more minute." He gave me the minute. He was a good kid. When I finally let go, Mason looked past me and saw my father, and his face did something complicated and enormous confusion and relief, and the particular pain of a child who has understood that something serious has happened to someone they love, even without being told the details. "Grandpa!" He crossed the lobby in 4 steps and hugged my father around the middle, carefully, instinctively gentle in the way children sometimes are when they can see that an adult is hurt. "What happened to your face?" My father put his good arm around Mason and held on. "I had a disagreement with someone," he said. "It's been resolved." "Did you win?" My father looked at me over Mason's head. "Your mother won," he said. "I just helped." Jack sat in a chair in the corner while Darlene, who turned out to have a first aid kit the size of a small suitcase and absolutely zero interest in asking questions, cleaned and dressed the wound in his shoulder with the efficiency of someone who had done this before. Jack bore it without complaint, which was either stoicism or shock. I chose to believe stoicism. We were back on the road to Denver by 8:30 in the morning. Mason buckled in the back next to my father, the two of them talking in the low, private way of a grandfather and grandchild who have reached an agreement about the world. I drove. Jack rode shotgun, shoulder-dressed, face pale, but eyes alert. Somewhere north of Pueblo, my father leaned forward between the seats. Cortez, he said. She'll be expecting Ethan to deliver the drive today. When he doesn't, she'll know something has gone wrong. She already knows, I said. She called me 2 nights ago. She knew exactly where we were. Then she'll move. He looked at me steadily. Allie Cortez isn't just Echelon's representative. She's been the architect of this from the beginning. Ethan was her instrument. Without the drive, without Ethan, she has nothing left to lose, which makes her the most dangerous she's ever been. Jack turned in his seat. What does she have left to bargain with? She has contacts in 6 congressional oversight committees, my father said. She has enough buried leverage to make this disappear from the inside if she gets to the right people before we do. He paused. There's a meeting. Today. She and Ethan were supposed to transfer the full Helios operational package to an Echelon representative at a private location in Denver. A final handoff before the technology goes dark and untraceable. Where, I asked. My father's expression told me the answer before he said it. St. Anne's Chapel, he said. Off Colfax. She picked it because it has no security cameras on the exterior single point of entry and sits in a residential neighborhood where nobody asks questions about private vehicles. He stopped. I don't know if she chose it because it was strategically optimal or because she knew what it meant to your family and wanted the symbolism. I stared at the road ahead. St. Anne's Chapel, where Ethan and I had stood at the altar on a Saturday in October 11 years ago, and my father had walked me down the aisle, and I had believed with my whole heart that I was beginning the best part of my life. Mom, Mason's voice from the back seat quiet and careful. Are we going home? I thought about the house in Denver, the one that was ash and foundation. Now the one where 8 birthday candles had burned themselves out on a cake nobody ate. Not that home, I said, but we're going to make sure we can have one. He nodded like this made sense to him. Maybe it did. Children who have been through enough sometimes understand things that should take longer. I pressed the accelerator down and watched Denver grow larger on the horizon, gray and familiar, and full of everything I had not yet finished. St. Anne's Chapel, where it started, where it would end. I was ready. I left Mason in the car with the doors locked and Jack's second prepaid phone in his hand with instructions to call 911 if we were not back in 20 minutes and to stay on the floor if he heard anything loud. He looked at me with those dark eyes that saw more than an 8-year-old should have to see, and he said, "Okay, Mom, be careful." And I kissed his forehead and walked away without looking back, because looking back was not something I could afford to do right now. Jack stayed 2 steps behind me, his good arm free, his eyes moving. My father walked on my left upright and deliberate the way soldiers walk when they are in pain and have decided not to acknowledge it. St. Anne's Chapel sat on a quiet street in the Capitol Hill neighborhood, wedged between a dry cleaner and a row of brownstones, its stone face darkened by decades of Denver weather. From the outside, it looked like exactly what it was, an old Catholic chapel with a heavy wooden door and a small rose window above the entrance, the colored glass catching the winter light and scattering it into pieces. I had walked through that door for the first time 11 years ago, in a white dress holding my father's arm, my hands shaking with happiness. I pushed it open now with my jaw set and my hand inside my jacket. The interior was dim and still, and smelled of old candle wax and cold stone. The stained glass windows on either side of the nave threw fragments of red and gold across the empty pews. At the far end before the altar, 2 figures stood in the light. Ethan, and beside him Maria Cortez. Cortez was a woman in her late 40s with the kind of face that had been carefully arranged into permanent composure. She wore a dark coat and no jewelry, and she stood with her hands clasped in front of her like someone waiting for a meeting to begin, which was, I supposed, exactly what she was doing. Ethan looked at me as I came down the aisle, and something moved behind his eyes. Recognition calculation, and underneath both of those something I had not seen there before. Something that might have been in another man the first sign of uncertainty. "You came," he said. "You knew I would. I knew you'd try." He glanced at my father and his expression tightened by a degree. "Colonel, you look better than you did 12 hours ago." "I feel better," my father said. "Perspective does that." Cortez stepped forward, and her voice was the same smooth, calibrated instrument it had been on the phone. "Mrs. Bell, I think we can all agree that this situation has become unnecessarily complicated. You have something we need. We have the capacity to make the rest of your life either very difficult or very simple. I'd encourage you to think practically. I am thinking practically, I said. That's why I'm here. I reached into my jacket pocket. Ethan's hand moved toward his weapon, and I pulled out my phone instead, holding it up where everyone could see the screen. Before anyone does anything permanent, I said, I think you should both watch something. I pressed play. The audio filled the chapel. Ethan's voice captured on the recording from the Vantage 99 security system that I had extracted onto the micro SD along with everything else. His voice was calm and businesslike and entirely recognizable. Once Helios transfers to Echelon's operational control, Colonel Bell becomes a liability. He has too much institutional knowledge and too many old contacts who still trust him. The cleanest solution is permanent removal. Cortez has approved the timeline. I watched my father's face as he listened. He had known in the abstract what Ethan was. He had understood it intellectually from the moment Jack had shown him the detention record. But hearing Ethan's voice discuss his death in the same tone he might have used to discuss a budget adjustment, that was a different kind of knowing. I watched it move through my father the way weather moves through an open field, visible and total. His jaw tightened until the muscle along it stood out sharp against his skin. Cortez's expression did not change. That recording was obtained illegally and will be inadmissible in any. It's not for a courtroom, I said. It's been sent to 11 journalists and 4 congressional staffers in the past 40 minutes, along with every file on that drive, every video, every signature, every offshore transfer. I looked at Ethan. Your phone is probably already ringing. Ethan's hand was still near his weapon. He was doing the math the way he always did, calculating odds and angles and exits, finding the move that cost the least and returned the most. I knew how he thought. I had lived inside his thinking for 10 years. What he had never understood was that I had been learning to think faster. Dad, my voice was steady. You don't have to say anything. My father turned to look at Ethan, this man he had welcomed into his family, this man he had trusted with his daughter, this man who had just been recorded scheduling his death in language more suited to a maintenance request. When he spoke, his voice was the quietest I had ever heard it, which somehow made it carry further than a shout. I served this country for 38 years, he said. I served in conditions that would have broken most people under orders that I did not always agree with in the name of something I believed was worth the cost. He looked at Ethan with an expression that had no heat in it anymore, just a cold, clear, complete seeing. I believe that oath extended to you. I believed you were the kind of man worth giving my daughter to. That was the worst judgment I have ever made, and I will carry it. He stepped forward, positioning himself between Ethan and me. But I will not carry it quietly, and I will not carry it alone. Cortez said something sharp to the 2 men who had materialized from the shadows near the side door. I saw them reach toward their jackets. Ethan looked at me across the length of the chapel, the colored light of the windows falling across him in pieces red and gold and blue, the same colors that had been there on our wedding day. He looked at me the way someone looks at a miscalculation they should have caught earlier, with something that was not quite regret, but was adjacent to it. His hand moved toward his weapon. In 38 minutes, it will have been sent to 11 journalists, 4 congressional staffers, 2 international wire services, and a secure digital archive in Geneva. Jack built the relay. All I have to do is press one button. I held up the phone. You have 38 minutes to make a decision, or I press it now. The first phone went off 4 seconds after I pressed send. It belonged to the guard nearest the side door, a man in his 30s with a tactical vest, and the expression of someone who had decided a long time ago not to ask questions about the work he was doing. He reached for his earpiece automatically, then stopped when he realized the sound was coming from his jacket pocket. He pulled the phone out, looked at the screen. His hand went very still. The second phone went off, then a third, then Cortez's. The chapel filled with the particular sound of multiple notifications arriving at once, which is not a sound you expect to hear in a place built for silence and prayer. It was almost absurd. It would have been funny if everything that had led to this moment had not cost so much. Don't! Cortez's voice cut across the noise, sharp and commanding, directed at her men. Whatever you are looking at, do not. Ma'am. The guard by the side door turned his phone toward her. His voice had changed. The professional flatness was gone, replaced by something more human and less manageable. Ma'am, this is everywhere. Cortez crossed the floor in 3 steps and snatched the phone from his hand. I watched her face as she read. The composure she had maintained through every version of this conversation, through the phone call in the snow outside Estes Park, through every calculated move she had made across the past 48 hours, developed a crack in it, small, precise, right down the center. Precise. Right. This was sent to every major outlet simultaneously, she said. Not to me, more to herself, recalibrating in real time. That's not possible with a single device. You needed a relay system. You needed... She looked up at Jack, who was standing near the back pew with his good arm at his side and his expression entirely neutral. I've been building the relay for 6 weeks, Jack said pleasantly. 11 journalists, 4 congressional staffers, 2 international wire services, and a secure archive at a non-profit digital rights organization in Geneva, just in case anyone tries to suppress the domestic releases. He paused. I'm thorough. Ethan had not moved. He was standing at the front of the chapel with his hand still near his weapon, and he was looking at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before in 10 years of marriage, in 10 years of knowing him, in 10 years of believing I understood the landscape of his interior life. He was afraid. Not of what was coming. Not of the legal consequences, the trial. The prison, the permanent destruction of the career he had spent his life constructing. He was afraid of something smaller and more specific than any of those things. He was afraid of the fact that I had beaten him, that I had walked into his facility with his own access card and used his own system against him and walked back out with everything, and he had not seen it coming, and there was no version of his own self-image that had room for that. The guard by the side door lowered his weapon, then the one behind Cortez. One by one around the chapel, the men who had come here under Ethan's authority made the quiet individual calculation that there was no longer anything worth protecting. From the chapel doorway, 2 figures stepped inside. Dark jackets, federal badges already visible, moving with the specific purposefulness of people who have been waiting for exactly this moment. Jack had spent 6 weeks building a relay system. It turned out he had spent 6 weeks building more than that. One of them crossed the nave toward Ethan with handcuffs already out. Ethan Bell, you are under arrest pursuant to a federal warrant issued by the U.S. District Court for the District of Colorado on charges including conspiracy against the United States and violations of Title 18. You have the right to remain silent. Ethan looked at the handcuffs. He looked at the guard. He looked at me. He did not reach for his weapon. I think in the end he understood that it would not have helped him. Whatever calculation he ran in those final seconds, the answer came back the same every time. He put his hands behind his back. The sound of the handcuffs closing was very small in the large space of the chapel. Smaller than I expected it to be. I had imagined this moment in a dozen forms across the past 48 hours, and in none of them had it been this quiet. Cortez was next. She did not resist. She stood with her chin up and her coat perfectly straight, performing dignity with the dedication of someone who had nothing else left to perform. 2 of her own men secured her wrists, and she looked at Ethan as they did it with an expression that communicated very precisely that she considered this entirely his fault. My father had not moved from his position between me and the altar. When it was over, when every weapon in the chapel had been lowered and every pair of handcuffs had been closed, he exhaled slowly, a long, controlled breath that carried something with it on the way out. Not relief exactly. Something older than relief. Something that comes from standing upright through a thing that was trying to knock you down and finding that you are still standing when it stops. Richard, I touched his arm. I'm all right. He covered my hand with his for a moment. I'm all right, Allie. They walked Ethan toward the chapel doors, and he passed me at a distance of perhaps 4 feet, close enough that I could see the specific color of his eyes in the morning light coming through the rose window. The same eyes I had looked at across a dinner table 1,000 times, across a pillow, across a hospital bed the night Mason was born. He stopped. The guard beside him stopped with him. He looked at me for a long moment. And I looked back, and I did not look away because I had done nothing that required looking away, and because I was done letting this man determine the direction of my eyes. I want you to know, he said, that it wasn't always an act. I thought about that for exactly as long as it deserved. I know, I said. That's the worst part. They walked him out through the heavy wooden door and into the gray Denver morning, and the door swung shut behind him, with the particular finality of things that are over. The chapel went quiet. The colored light from the windows moved slowly across the stone floor as a cloud passed outside. My father put his arm around my shoulders, and I leaned into it, and Jack sat down in the nearest pew and closed his eyes and breathed, and somewhere outside in a locked car, my son was waiting for me to come back. I had come back. The U.S. District Court for the District of Colorado was everything St. Anne's Chapel was not fluorescent lit and aggressively modern, its walls the color of institutional indifference, its air carrying the particular flatness of a building that processes human lives at scale and has stopped noticing the weight of them. I sat in the witness box on a Wednesday morning in February, 6 weeks after Denver, with my hands folded on the rail in front of me and my eyes steady on the 6 federal officials seated across the room. My father sat behind the prosecution table with Jack beside him, Jack's shoulder in a proper sling now, instead of the improvised dressing from Darlene's first aid kit. Mason was not in the courtroom. He was in the hallway with a victim's advocate named Patricia, who had warm eyes and an apparently inexhaustible supply of crackers, which was all Mason had really required from the situation. The lead official leaned forward over his papers. He had the face of a man who had spent decades making difficult things sound simple, and he used it now with practiced authority. Mrs. Bell, he said, the committee would like to understand how a civilian FBI employee obtained and distributed classified Helios operational data without authorization from any supervising agency. I looked at him for a moment. The data wasn't classified, I said. It was buried. There's a difference. Classification is a legal designation. Burial is just hiding something and hoping no one looks. The methods by which you accessed Vantage 99 were possible because I designed the surveillance blind spots that allowed undetected entry, I said, on my husband's instruction, which is documented in the operational record that has now been reviewed by the Senate Intelligence Committee, the Department of Justice Inspector General, and 4 independent oversight bodies. I kept my voice level. I didn't break into a secure facility. I walked through the holes that Ethan Bell specifically asked me to build into a building where my father was being held, without due process, by a man using federal resources to run a private black operation. If the committee would like to discuss what constitutes a breach of protocol in that context, I am genuinely interested in that conversation. There was a silence in the room that was not entirely comfortable. The official on the far left set down his pen. Mrs. Bell, he said, and his voice was slightly different from his colleague's, less processed, more human. What you did required considerable courage. The committee acknowledges that. The committee should acknowledge the people in those videos, I said. The ones who were subjected to a behavioral conditioning program built on my research without my knowledge or consent. That is what this hearing should be about. It was in the end what the hearing became about. The formal proceedings lasted 11 days. Ethan Bell's federal criminal trial lasted 4 months. He was convicted on 7 counts, including conspiracy against the United States, violation of anti-torture statutes under Title 18, and misappropriation of federal resources for private financial gain. He was sentenced to 31 years in a federal correctional facility in Pennsylvania. His name was removed from every commendation and service record in the Bureau's history. Maria Cortez received 23 years. Echelon Industries was dissolved by court order. Its assets seized, its principals facing separate criminal proceedings that were still ongoing when the seasons changed. Project Helios was shut down permanently on a Thursday in March by order of a federal judge in Denver. I was not in the courtroom when the order was signed. I was in a park with Mason, watching him attempt to teach my father how to fly a kite, which my father was approaching with the same focused gravity he had brought to every challenge of his military career, and which was not going particularly well, and which was the most beautiful thing I had seen in as long as I could remember. I received prosecutorial immunity in exchange for my full cooperation and testimony. It was not something I had asked for. It was something the Justice Department offered in recognition of the fact that the alternative prosecuting the woman who had exposed the largest domestic intelligence scandal in a decade was not a position anyone wanted to defend publicly. Jack Ryland was reinstated to the Bureau with full back pay and a commendation he said he intended to frame ironically and hang in his bathroom. His shoulder healed completely by April. He called me on the first of every month for the rest of that year, sometimes with information, sometimes with nothing more than a check-in that neither of us acknowledged as the thing it was two people making sure the other one was still standing. My father moved in with us in Boise. Not permanently, he insisted. Temporarily. While his apartment in Arizona was being renovated, which was a renovation that had not been scheduled before any of this, and which he arranged specifically so that he would have a reason to stay. I did not call him on it. The house we rented had a yard with a fence and an old oak tree, and a view of the Boise foothills that turned the color of copper in the late afternoon. And my father sat on the porch most evenings, with a cup of coffee, and watched the light change in a way that looked for the first time in as long as I had known him like rest. It was a Saturday in December when Mason came running across the yard, his boots dark from the wet grass, his breath making clouds in the cold air. The snow had started that morning light, tentative, the first real snow of the season, and it was falling now, in soft, unhurried flakes that settled on his hair and his shoulders, and the upturned face he turned toward me as he reached the porch steps. Mom! He was out of breath from running. Mom, are we safe now? I crouched down to his level the way I had in the parking lot of a motel in Pueblo 4 months ago, the way I had in every version of this conversation we'd had since the night our house burned. I looked at his face, this face I knew better than my own, this face that had my father's eyes, and nothing of Ethan in it, nothing that belonged to that man at all despite everything. Yes, I said, and this time when I said it there was no qualifier underneath it, no silent addition, no part of me holding back a reservation. We're safe, we're okay, we're exactly where we're supposed to be. Mason studied me with the precision of a child who has learned to check his mother's face for the truth behind the words. He found it. I watched him find it. The specific moment when a child's body releases tension it has been carrying so long, it has forgotten what the absence of it feels like. His shoulders dropped. His breath came out long and slow. Good, he said. He turned and ran back across the yard toward my father, who was attempting to hang a bird feeder from the oak tree with the focused determination of a man who has decided this is the thing he is doing today. Colonel, Mason shouted, I'll hold the ladder. I don't need a ladder, my father said with great dignity. You're definitely going to need a ladder, Mason said. I sat on the porch steps and wrapped both hands around my coffee mug and watched the snow fall on the yard and the tree and the two of them underneath it. And I felt the particular quality of quiet that comes after a storm has passed. Not silence, but the opposite of silence. The fullness of ordinary sounds, the hum of a world continuing. Somewhere in a federal facility in Pennsylvania, a man who had once slow danced with me in a kitchen was beginning the first year of 31. I did not think about him the way I had expected to think about him. I did not carry grief for who I had believed he was, or rage at what he had done, or the specific ache of a love that turned out to have been built on performance. I carried Mason's question and the answer I had finally been able to give him without reservation. We were safe. We were okay. We were exactly where we were supposed to be. The snow fell. My father needed the ladder. My son went to get it. And somewhere in the house behind me, an old radio was playing something soft and familiar, and I let it play. If there is one thing this story of family betrayal taught me, it is this. The most dangerous lies are not the ones told by strangers. They are the ones told by the people who sleep beside you, eat at your table, and call themselves your family. I spent 10 years choosing warmth over truth, and I nearly paid for it with everything. My father used to say that God does not remove the fire. He walks you through it and makes sure you come out the other side still standing. I believe that now, in a way, I never could have before that December night. So let me say this plainly from someone who lived it. Do not let love make you blind. Family betrayal does not always come wearing a mask. Sometimes it comes wearing a wedding ring. And family revenge is never as clean as we imagine it will be. It costs something even when justice wins. If you are in a relationship where something feels wrong but you keep explaining it away, stop. Trust that instinct. I wish someone had told me to trust mine. My personal opinion. No system, no title, no amount of power protects anyone who believes they will never be held accountable. Family revenge and family betrayal always leave a trail. Truth always surfaces. Always. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you of something you needed to hear, please leave a comment below. Share it with someone who needs it. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel. Stories of family revenge, of truth outlasting power. Stories like this one exist because you keep showing up for them. Thank you so much for staying with me until the very end. It means more than you know. And one gentle note before you go, the stories ahead contain fictional elements shaped carefully for the purpose of education and reflection. If that is not what you are looking for today, it is perfectly okay to step away and find something that serves you better. I will always respect that choice.
Some days feel off, like I'm standing but still falling. A little pain, a little tired, and no one to tell it all to. There are days that feel unsteady, like I'm drifting out of place. Every step just feels so heavy, with a smile I have to fake. A little hurt I keep inside me, a little weight I always hide, and 1,000 quiet worries I've been holding deep inside. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you. I keep walking through the silence like it's all I've ever known. Every crowded room reminds me how it feels to be alone. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you. Maybe one day I'll be stronger, maybe I'll learn how to speak, but for now I keep it buried in the parts of me too weak. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you. They say just forget, move on like it's easy. But forgetting you feels like remembering someone I've never seen. I've been trying to erase you from the places in my mind, but the harder that I fight it, the more you're hard to leave behind. Every memory keeps slipping through the cracks I try to close, like a face I should remember, but somehow never know. Forgetting you feels impossible, like chasing something I can't hold, like trying to remember someone that I've never even known. I keep reaching through the silence for a past I can't undo, 'cause letting go of what we had feels like losing something true. Every moment turns to fragments, every thought just fades to blue, like I'm searching for a feeling that still only leads to you. Forgetting you feels impossible, like chasing something I can't hold, like trying to remember someone that I've never even known. I keep reaching through the silence for a past I can't undo, 'cause letting go of what we had feels like losing something true. If I never met you, maybe I would know just how to heal, but now every empty moment still reminds me what is real. Forgetting you feels impossible, like chasing something I can't hold, like trying to remember someone that I've never even known. I keep reaching through the silence for a past I can't undo, 'cause letting go of what we had feels like losing something true.